Hello, my friends. It's Monday, October 6, 2025, and I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, your Red State refugee. And welcome to the Radical Russ Show, your home for pothead political punditry. Coming to you from Rolla J Studios in Southern Oregon. Goes down smooth. Hey! On this week's smoke session, news media warn of the growing threat of left-wing violence. The Trump regime ramps up more attacks on Chicago and Portland. Democrats surprisingly stand firm on rejecting the Republican budget. Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth give speeches to our military. Texas megachurches have a pedophilia problem. Idaho really, really hates marijuana. And a rant for everybody who told me I was overreacting last November. But before we get to all the serious political stuff, we've got time for 3 quick hits. Let's start off our quick hits with some news from the NFL. And first of all, did you hear about this this stabbing? So Mark Sanchez used to be a quarterback in the NFL, most known for what's called the butt fumble. In that, was it a playoff game where he turns to do the fumble and he hits the lineman's butt and fumbles the ball? That's what he used to be known for. But now, apparently, according to the reports, Mark Sanchez, late at night, attacked a delivery driver. This 69-year-old guy who's a delivery driver says that Sanchez, and apparently there's video too, Sanchez came out drunk, telling this driver he was like changing the oil, like the fryer oil or recycling the oil, something like that. Sanchez comes out, tells him he can't park there in the alley, gets belligerent with the guy, tries to get into the guy's truck to drive it off, to move it, ends up pushing and fighting against the guy. This poor 69-year-old guy gets, some contusions, some bruises. He pepper sprays Sanchez to try to get him off him. Sanchez just wipes his pepper spray away, starts coming at the guy again. He pulls a knife and stabs him. And apparently the cops have all the video they need because they've charged Sanchez with the assault and illegally getting into the car and public drunk, a bunch of stuff, right? So, wow, what a career where the butt fumble ends up being the second most embarrassing thing. In other football-related news, it was announced that Bad Bunny, the Puerto Rican reggaeton superstar, would be performing the Super Bowl 60 halftime show, and the head of the Department of Fatherland Security, Kristi Noem, is not too happy about that.
And your message to the NFL with this decision? It seems like they were trying to send a message to the Trump administration?
Well, they suck, and we'll win, and God will bless us, and we'll stand and be proud of ourselves at the end of the day, and they won't be able to sleep at night because they don't know what they believe, and they're so weak. Well, we'll fix it.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Her displeasure comes from the fact that, one, Bad Bunny wouldn't take his tour to the United States this year for fear that ICE would round up so many of his Latino fans, and he has been outspoken against the Trump maladministration. But also, Bad Bunny only performs in Spanish, and there's been a lot of talk on the right wing about how dare he, we need Americans performing for the Super Bowl speaking English. Never mind the fact that Bad Bunny is American because Puerto Ricans are Americans. But also, you didn't hear a whole lot of this complaint about Americans performing for the American Super Bowl when it was Paul McCartney or The Who or the Rolling Stones or Coldplay or Rihanna. They're still upset about Kendrick Lamar from last year. But it makes sense from the NFL's point of view. They want to expand into the Latin market. They want to expand into Mexico, into South America. And Latinos are the fastest growing fan base for the NFL. And let's face it, you're going to need a whole lot more Latino and black kids to want to play football in order to keep this league functioning. I guess all our quick hits today are about football because today there are no more undefeated teams in the NFL. The 4-0 Philadelphia Eagles lost their game. The 4-0 Buffalo Bills lost their game. Pretty early week in the season to no longer have any undefeated teams. I was wondering, when was the last time we got to week 5 without any undefeated teams? Turns out the last time that happened was way back in 2014. There was actually 3 teams in 2014, the Eagles, the Bengals, and the Cardinals, that were 3-0 that all lost their next game. The same thing happened as well in 2010 when the Bears, Steelers, and Chiefs were all 3-0 and then lost their next game. So it's been a while, and that just goes to show the parity that we now have in the NFL. Our main story this week is the continuing attacks by this regime against democratically run cities, notably the city of Chicago and my old hometown of Portland. Starting with Chicago, of course, the horrific news that ICE used Black Hawk helicopters to rappel down onto an apartment building in Chicago, just going door to door, rousting everyone in the apartment building, gathering up Latino people, black people, children, some naked, zip tying the hands of toddlers behind their back. They say about 50% of the people that were rousted in this raid were American citizens who were doing nothing wrong, who had no warrants, no criminal records, and apparently no more Fourth Amendment rights. They managed to arrest 2. They managed to find 2 guys that had warrants that might have been gang members. An entire apartment building rousted in the middle of the night, terrorizing these people. And you may not have heard about this because ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN refused to cover it, did not cover it when it happened that night, the breaking news, or the next morning. Just another ICE raid, no big deal apparently in this country. And the attacks continue. We've seen the videos coming out of Chicago where the guys from ICE are just throwing tear gas canisters into the street and driving off, gassing a neighborhood that included an elementary school, kids puking, having to be taken to the hospital. We've heard of the woman who was shot by the ICE that allege that she boxed them in and was part of 10 cars that were boxing in. And the videos that I've seen so far from behind, it appears that ICE are actually boxing her in. And ICE was pushing some other guy's car. You can't believe a thing that comes out of this regime. And we're also starting to see Illinois State Police and local cops helping ICE to assault innocent Chicagoans and people that are protesting. And Governor Pritzker says they're just there to make sure that they're safe and they can continue to protest, but that doesn't seem to be what's happening on the ground, Governor. I urge you to get there to Broadview yourself. Put your own body on the line. Enough talk. Meanwhile, in Portland, this has been the legal haranguing around this. So Trump, for some reason, has got it in his mind that Portland is burning to the ground, relentlessly on fire, relentlessly being attacked, when it's my belief that he's just got his aides. He's just got Stephen Miller there cooking him up some manufactured videos from 2020 during the George Floyd protests in Portland that got out of hand. But that's it. Trump thinks Portland's on fire and he needs to send in the National Guard. So Trump goes, this thing. You remember the Electric Company? The old PBS kids show, The Electric Company? Or maybe this was on Sesame Street, but I think it was Electric Company. Maybe it was Sesame Street. But anyway, it's the old coffee and a sweet roll thing, right? Where the guy goes in and says, yeah, I'd like a coffee and a sweet roll. And the server says, oh, I'm sorry, sir. We're all out of sweet rolls. He says, oh, okay. Well, then I guess I'll have, chocolate milk and a sweet roll. And she says, oh, but, sir, I'm sorry. We're all out of sweet rolls. Oh, okay. Well, then I'll have orange juice and a sweet roll. We're all out of sweet rolls. Right? You remember that one? Maybe just me. Anyway, the legal haranguing on this. So Trump wants to send the National Guard to Portland. And so he calls up and federalizes like 100 or 200 Oregon National Guard troops to go into Portland. And the judge, who is a judge that Trump appointed in his first term, the judge puts out a temporary restraining order on that and says, no. I've looked at what's going on in Portland, and there's nothing going on there that justifies sending the Oregon National Guard in there. So that night, Trump says, okay, well, I'll have orange juice and a sweet roll. He federalizes the California National Guard to send in. and then the Texas Guard. Well, I'll send the Texas Guard. And the judge had to smack him down, like in the middle of the night, had to hold a hearing and say, what the hell do you think you're doing, trying to get around my temporary restraining order? Well, you said we couldn't send the Oregon Guard, so we're going to send the California Guard. My order didn't have anything to do with where they're coming from, Oregon or California or Texas. It had to do with the fact that there's nothing in Portland worth sending any guard to. Well, could I have water and a sweet roll? Because what's going on in Portland right now is one block out there on Macadam, where the ice facility is. And usually it's 2 or 3 people hanging out with flowers. Or more lately, the Portland Frog. Have you seen the Portland Frog? This guy in one of those inflatable frog costumes. There's this great video of him facing ice and them all backing down. This comes after a previous video, I guess from the night before, where the ice is trying to pepper spray and tear gas everyone. And so one of the ice guys comes up to the frog, the inflatable frog guy, and sprays the pepper spray in his vent, in his air vent, to fill his whole costume with pepper spray. Can't imagine that might not be painful, dangerous, harmful in some way. Now, the Portland Frog guy said, I love this. He said, oh no, I'm Mexican. I've had much spicier. That's a great attitude. But they continue to try to stoke the violence. You can just tell Stephen Miller is itching to get some sort of conflict going that would justify enacting the Insurrection Act, putting troops in the streets and having soldiers fire upon American citizens. You know that's what he wants. And I hear people out there, I see them online, not American soldiers. American soldiers are taught the laws of lawful engagement. There's no way American National Guardsmen would fire on American citizens. Not only is that a Pollyannish kind of viewpoint, but it's also very ignorant of American history. You could start off with Kent State in 1970, when National Guard fired upon Vietnam protesters and killed 4 people. You go back to the entire history of the American labor movement, state after state, decade after decade, from about 1875 through the 1930s, when companies and governors would call out the National Guard or hire Pinkerton thugs to assault and murder and massacre people in the labor movement. Deaths in the hundreds, the Battle of Blair Mountain, for example. We can even look as recently as 1985 in Philadelphia, when the city used a helicopter to bomb an apartment building full of men, women, and children. The MOVE bombings. Look that up. So far, Portland and Chicago haven't taken the bait. They've managed to keep their cool. Let's hope that continues, because the right-wing violence is on the rise. Just this morning, I had to see the news of the judge in South Carolina, Diane Goodstein, which really took my breath for a second, because I have a very good friend in California named Diane Goldstein, who's the head of the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, a former cop from Redondo Beach. Wonderful woman. I'm like, Diane Goldstein? Oh, no. Goodstein, South Carolina. This judge's $1.5 million lakefront mansion suffered an explosion, burned to the ground. Her husband, her kids were there, had to jump out the windows. He ended up breaks his leg, had to go to the hospital over this. This just a day or two after Stephen Miller and Donald Trump are posting their stochastic terrorism online, talking about the radical left-wing judges. We need to do something about the radical left-wing judges, and apparently someone did. They're going to get people killed. They want to get people killed. They're all in on this. You realize they see that this is their one chance. This is their one chance in the rapidly declining demographic of straight white Christian Republican men having the chance to take this country over. This is their shot. They know in the coming decades they are outnumbered. They know that Americans under 30 are more likely to not be white. This is the first generation, Gen Z, the first generation in American history, where white people are a minority. That's right. White people are a minority, Gen Z and below. And they can see the writing on the wall. So this is their opportunity, and they are all in on it. They say it in their rhetoric. A second American Revolution, which will, quote, be bloodless if the left allows it. They see this as nothing short of taking their country back. These are the guys that are the descendants of the original signers of the Declaration of Independence that kept slaves and forced this country into a compromise to allow slavery. These are the descendants of the Confederates who wanted to break this country apart because it believed that, hey, look, we were founded as a slave country. Why can't we keep slaves? They're the descendants of the KKK that fought against segregation and Reconstruction. They are the descendants of the Nazi sympathizers in the World War II era. They are the current Proud Boys and Oath Keepers and 3%ers and the rest of these militia morons who don't understand the plain meaning of our Constitution, nor do they have any reverence for the rule of law that it establishes. This is a fascist movement. This is a right-wing, might makes right movement. And it's up to us to call it out for what it is, to maintain the peace, to continue to protest nonviolently. We cannot let this turn into a violent battle because they'll win that. They know how to win the violence. We need to turn to the lessons of Gandhi, the lessons of Martin Luther King, and to show through nonviolence and adherence to the law that we can maintain this country, that we can bring this country back to the words of the founding fathers, not their attitudes, not their actions, but their words, that all men are created equal, that we're all entitled to due process of law, that we're all citizens if we're born here. Keep up the fight. I'll see you at the No Kings rally on October 18th. Time to take a look at our national stories, and the headlines are alarming. Left-wing political violence reaches record high, warns the National Review. Newsweek explains there's the growing threat of political violence from the left. Left-wing terrorism is on the rise, states The Atlantic, while The Independent details that left-wing attacks outnumber those from the right for the first time in decades. Really? I began to think about the high-profile incidents of political violence that have occurred since Trump took his escalator ride to infamy back in 2015. Immediately, I could think of about a dozen right-wing incidents, but surely that must be because I'm such a left-wing guy. The only left-wing political violence I could recall was the shooting at the Congressional Republican softball practice back in 2017, when Representative Steve Scalise was shot. So, you know me, I look shit up. I finally found the study that all these alarming headlines refer to. It's from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, entitled Left-Wing Terrorism and Political Violence in the United States, What the Data Tells Us. When I read through the study and finally found out just how many incidents of left-wing political violence had occurred this year, I was stunned. It is 5. That's right. All the breathless coverage of the rise of left-wing political violence is referring to 5 incidents that have occurred in 2025. That's up from 3 in 2024 and just one in 2023. So, how are these media outlets reporting that, as The Atlantic says, for the first time in more than 30 years, attacks by the far left outnumber those by the far right? Well, because technically it's true. There have been 5 left-wing incidents and 1 right-wing incident in 2025. But looking at the bigger picture, the dominance of right-wing extremist violence becomes clear. As the report explains, quote, since 2015, right-wing extremists have been linked to 267 terror plots or attacks, resulting in 91 fatalities. By contrast, far-left actors accounted for 66 incidents and 19 deaths, often targeting property rather than people. In 2022, all 25 extremist-related murders were committed by right-wing perpetrators, 21 of them tied to white supremacists. The trend held firm in 2023 and 2024, with right-wing actors responsible for every identified extremist killing, end quote. There has been an average of just over 24 attacks and 8 fatalities every year from the right, compared to 6 attacks and less than 1 fatality from the left in the Trump era. Literally 4 times as many attacks and 8 times as many deaths come from the right. That's because attacks from the right come in the form of mass shootings against targeted groups. The 2015 Charleston church shooting targeting blacks, the 2018 Tree of Life synagogue shooting targeting Jews, the 2019 El Paso Walmart massacre targeting Latinos, and the 2022 Buffalo supermarket shooting targeting blacks again. Then there are the right-wing attacks of a personally political nature. The 2020 Michigan governor kidnapping plot, the 2020 killing by Kyle Rittenhouse, the 2022 hammer attack on Paul Pelosi, the 2022 shooting at Louisville Mayor Craig Greenberg, and the 2025 Melissa Hortman assassination. But attacks from the left tend to be targeting property, not people, like in 2022 when there was a series of firebombings against pro-life pregnancy centers, attacks that were timed at night to avoid fatalities. There was a GOP headquarters that was shot up, again while vacant, in New Mexico this year, with vandalism added, reading ICE equals KKK. Then there's the question of what is and is not being counted. For instance, the arson attack on Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro isn't considered a right-wing attack, but an ethno-nationalist attack based on anger over Israel's obliteration of Gaza. Apparently Jewish outranks Democrat in Shapiro's bio. Luigi Mangioni's shooting of a health insurance CEO is cataloged as left-wing violence, when it's really more of a personal vendetta. Thomas Crooks's attempted assassination of Donald Trump is classified as left-wing violence, though it's unclear whether he had political motivations beyond shoot someone famous. And a woman who turned herself into Capitol Police this year, saying she planned to use Molotov cocktails to target Pete Hegseth, Mike Johnson, and Scott Bessent, is as much a left-wing attack as the Arizona DNC office being riddled with bullets last year is a right-wing attack. But the media, perhaps eager to get on the regime's good side, has gone all in for the headlines that left-wing violence is outpacing right-wing violence this year. Yes, as a percentage of the overall political violence this year, or as compared to the past 2 years, there is more left-wing political violence. But the reason behind that isn't some crazy upswing on the left. The data show that before Trump's escalator descent, the number of left-wing incidents hovered between 0 and 3 every year. In the Trump era, that has risen to hovering between 1 and 8 every year. The real story is in the steep decline this year of right-wing political violence, with the researchers classifying only the assassination of Melissa Hortman in Minnesota for the right. A classification that elides one very important fact. Now the right-wing political violence is administration policy. Why does some lone wolf need to bother with attacking Latinos and blacks when Trump's ICE goons will rappel from Black Hawk helicopters in Chicago to roust an entire apartment building in the middle of the night, zip-tying half-clothed children and detaining American citizens of darker complexion? Right-wing terrorists aren't compelled to violence against the left this year because they can just join ICE and get paid for it. When it comes to the alleged rise in left-wing political violence, heed the words of Flavor Flav and don't believe the hype. 5 incidents of violence from the left isn't good, but there haven't been that few incidents on the right since 2007. And every incident of ICE terrorizing immigrants and American citizens without warrants and probable cause is right-wing political violence. All right, time to take a look to my left and see what the Democrats are up to, and this week it's pretty good. Of course, the federal government is in shutdown right now. The government shut down because the Democrats in the Senate, under the leadership of Chuck Schumer, are not budging on the filibuster, not ending the filibuster to go ahead and start voting on the budget that has already passed the House, that so-called big, beautiful bill. There's just been a few defections. Of course, John Fetterman from Pennsylvania and Cortez Masto from Nevada, 2 Democrats have voted to invoke cloture and move on to the Republican budget, as well as Angus King, the independent from Maine who caucuses with the Democrats. But the vote has come up a couple times now, and they've gotten the same result. So the Democrats are holding fast. Now, that doesn't mean that Chuck Schumer hasn't said anything stupid this week.
New data came out today from KFF, and that is not Kentucky Fried French fries. KFF could be Kentucky French fries. Nah.
Hide your family fingers.
I know. Orange.
God. Kentucky Fried French fries. You know it's bad when Amy Klobuchar is feeling cringe about this. Chuck, this isn't the time for jokes, and even if it was the time for jokes, you're no comedian. So please, stop that. Republicans, of course, are trying to keep this shutdown going. On the House side, Mike Johnson wants to keep it going because Adelita Grijalva won her special election to fill the seat that was vacated upon her father's death, one of the 3 Democrats that died in 2025, costing us 3 votes that could have been used. But she is the last one to be filled, and also she pledges to be the 218th vote, or signature, I should say, on the discharge petition that would force a vote in the House of Representatives to release the Epstein files. So, of course, Mike Johnson has kept the House on vacation. He gave them district work days, and I'm sure all those Republican Congress members are more than excited to go back to their districts and hear from their constituents. But the attack from the right, from Mike Johnson and others, has been to try to paint the Democrats as wanting the Republicans to fund health care for illegal immigrants.
If you're an American citizen, you've been to a hospital in the last few years, you probably noticed that wait times are especially large, and very often somebody who's there in the emergency room waiting is an illegal alien, very often a person who can't even speak English. Why do those people get health care benefits at hospitals paid for by American citizens? The answer is a decision made by the Biden administration that the Trump administration, working with congressional Republicans, undid. We turned off that money spigot to health care funding for illegal aliens. The Democrats, in their legislative text, want to turn it back on.
That, of course, is J.D. Vance talking about how often we all go to the ER and there's long wait times because there's some illegal immigrant there getting health care who doesn't even speak English. I mean, this happened to me even. A few years back, I blew out my knee, ended up having to get a total knee replacement. And I don't recall how long the ER wait was because I was in a great deal of pain, but I'll never forget that blonde guy screaming, mit benar brutet, mit vissem har gatut, who was rushed in before me. Oh, sure, your femur is protruding, but where are you from, sir? The nerve of some people. Okay, my apologies to the Swedes. I always just like to use Swedish people as the example to highlight the racism, the naked racism coming from the Vice President of the United States. How the hell do I know that someone getting healthcare treatment in the ER before me is entered this country without the proper papers? Just because they're speaking Spanish? You don't think we got a whole lot of Spanish-speaking American citizens in this country? And what a bunch of sickos these Republicans are. What are we supposed to do? Let the guy who picks our strawberries out there in the fields die because he got some sort of infection and can't go into the emergency room? We should let the woman who's changing the linens at the hotel, who gets in an accident, rush to the hospital. We should let her die in the parking lot? What kind of crazy, radical, left-wing pinko commie came up with some law that says we have to treat people who are illegally in this country in our emergency rooms? Let me check the history books here. Page through that. Oh, yeah. Ronald Wilson Reagan. That left-wing firebrand, yeah. Ronald Reagan signed the EMTALA Act, Emergency Medical Treatment Act, that says, yeah, we'll go ahead and spend some taxpayer money so that people don't die. That's really what they're talking about here. Vance is talking about taking out a provision of our law that allows for the emergency treatment of any human being who might need it. What a sick bunch of people these are. Here's Caroline Leavitt talking about it.
And it is an undisputed fact, a fact that under the Biden administration, illegal aliens were absolutely receiving taxpayer-funded health care benefits. In fact, in fiscal year 2024, Medicaid costs for emergency services for illegal immigrants skyrocketed by 142% from the previous year to $9.1 billion. That's $9.1 billion taxpayer dollars that were going to emergency services for illegals.
That's a woman wearing a Christian cross necklace, openly talking about how it just costs too much money $9 billion to treat people in emergency rooms who may have come into this country without the proper paperwork. Are you suggesting that the American taxpayers should let someone die in agony because they crossed an imaginary line without the right paperwork? Is that really the Republican standard? Well, of course. Yes, it is. They want us to die. All right, time to look over to my right and see what the Republicans are up to. And boy, this last week, there's been a couple of events that have really given me pause, and that is this Trump regime doing everything they can to try to pull the military onto their side when it comes to their plans for the future. I don't know, establishing martial law, shooting protesters, shutting down the 2026 midterm elections. I wouldn't put anything past them. But the good news is that the Secretary of Defense, or Secretary of Warface, Pete Hegseth, called in over 800 of our top generals, admirals, and enlisted personnel to give them a big old pep talk about how the military is not PC anymore, how men and women will have the same PT standards, there's no fatties and no beardos. All of these designed to turn the United States military into something white and delightsome. Changing the PT standards, of course, are something to try to winnow out the number of women in the ranks, especially the combat ranks. And the no fatties, that's, kind of ironic, coming from the fact that the commander-in-chief is a fatty. And the no beardos part, well, that's to get rid of black guys and Muslim guys and Sikh guys. The black guys, because they have a follicular disorder that a lot of black men get because of their little round whisker hairs. They'll bend underneath. If you try to shave them, they just grow back, but they bend underneath, and it's real painful. It's called shaving bumps. And I knew a few guys in basic training that were able to grow beards because of the shaving bumps issue as a medical exemption. Well, no more. They're going to get rid of that, so there goes a lot of your black soldiers. And then there's a religious exemption for the Muslims and the Sikhs. There they go. So he wants to turn this military into something that's white and delightsome and buff and strong and killers and warfighters. Never mind the fact that we live in the 21st century now. Ukraine is showing that the future of warfare is robotic. It's drones. You don't really need to pass a whole lot of PT or have a penis to be able to fly a combat drone. The military is a much more sophisticated operation than just a bunch of 11 Bravos with their M4s and M16s and artillery. There's a lot of electronics. There's a lot of logistics. There's a lot of intelligence operations in the military for which you want more diversity. You want more people involved, people with skills. They gave these speeches to the generals, and the best part about it, of course, were the generals were sat there stone-faced, did not give any sort of applause or laugh lines or anything. There's a couple times, like the one line that HEGSETH gave that says, "To our enemies, F-A-F-O." And then it was just dead silence, right? He's expecting applause. It's probably in his teleprompter there, "Hold for applause." Never came. Trump was so unnerved by it, he had a Jeb Bush moment. Please clap. Please applaud. So they had to redo the speeches again. This time they went to the Naval Academy. This happened just yesterday or today. And with enlisted men there, not privates, they're airmen. Yeah, Navy. Sorry, midshipmen. Which branch I'm talking about. So he spoke in front of the younger crowd. They did get a little more reaction out of them, but said some of the same dumb things that they said to the generals. And I just want to cover a couple of these. Here's Pete Hegseth talking about diversity.
Your diversity is not your strength. Your strength is your unity of purpose, your shared mission, your love of country.
Yeah, okay, so our diversity is not our strength. Diversity is a bad thing. That's why we're getting rid of all of the ships in the Navy except battleships. And that's why we're getting rid of all the planes and helicopters in the Air Force except for F-16s. And we're going to get rid of all of the firearms and artillery except for the M4 rifle. Why would you need a diverse set of weapons and a diverse set of planes and a diverse set of ships? Well, you just only need one kind of ship, one kind of plane, one kind of gun, right? Well, of course not. And the same thing goes with soldiers and sailors and airmen and Coast Guard and, what are they, space cadets? Guardians? I don't know what they call them in the Space Force. Marines, too. Diversity is our strength. That's what makes America the greatest country in the world. We're not limited to one type of person, one type of religion. Pete Hegseth wouldn't know that, though. And Trump thinks it's because we're too politically correct. We were too politically correct in the past to win our wars.
Problem with Vietnam, we stopped fighting to win. We would have won easy. We would have won Afghanistan easy. We would have won every war easy. But we got politically correct. Let's take it easy. We're not politically correct anymore, just so you understand. We win. Now we win.
Yeah, that's it. We were too politically correct in Vietnam. You know, when we were destroying the village in order to save it. Too politically correct in Cambodia and Laos from those crazy left-wing pinko commander-in-chief Richard Nixon and his wild leftist radical Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. Yeah, way too politically correct in Vietnam. Oh, and Afghanistan? Yeah. You know, when we were putting naked guys in piles and taking pictures of them, or putting them in a hood and a cape up on a box and attaching electrodes to them at Abu Ghraib. We were just so politically correct back then. Gosh, just so much political correctness. No wonder we couldn't win any wars. The other bit of republicanism I wanted to get to, just one quick little thing, is this whole deal with Kristi Noem, Ice Barbie. She goes to Chicago, and she's at one of these cop locations, and she just wants to use the bathroom.
Can we use the restroom? No, you cannot. We can?
Okay. All right. Thank you. Interesting. That's what Governor Pritzker says is cooperation in keeping people safe.
So why wouldn't they let you in? What's been going on here? What's been going on here, Secretary?
We were coming to go out and do some operations to pick up some guys with criminal convictions on them, and the city police wouldn't even let us use a restroom.
Oh, yeah. What a shame. They wouldn't let you use the bathroom. What's that like, to really need to go pee, and then someone won't let you do so because of your own inherent characteristics of who you are? Boy, that really sucks when somebody in authority says that you can't use a bathroom because of who you are. Huh, Republicans? This week for our regional look, we're going to take a look at the state of Texas because a name came across my social media feed that certainly caught my attention. Robert Morris. My mother's maiden name is Morris, and one of her cousins is Rob Morris. He played linebacker for the Indianapolis Colts. He even won a Super Bowl ring. But we're not talking about that Robert Morris. This Robert Morris is the Robert Morris who founded the Gateway Megachurch in Texas. The Robert Morris who was counted as Donald Trump's spiritual advisor. He just pleaded guilty to the sexual abuse of a 12-year-old starting in 1982. Morris was a traveling preacher then, living with a family in Oklahoma, where he continued abusing the daughter for the next 4 years. For admitting that he raped a girl from age 12 to age 16, Morris will be required to register as a sex offender. He'll have to pay $270,000 in restitution, and he will serve 6 months in the county jail. That's right, 4 years of pedophilic rape gets you a 6-month jail sentence in Texas. Though Morris was sentenced to 10 years in prison, the judge suspended 9.5 years of that when he'll just be serving probation. I wonder if the media will ever get around to asking Donald Trump about his former spiritual advisor's wonderful secrets. While the Morris case is astonishing, even more shocking is just how much pedophilia is going on in Texas megachurches in just the past year. In September of 25, John Paul Sheptock, a worship minister at the First Montgomery Baptist Church in Montgomery, was busted for the possession and production of child sexual abuse material. In August of 25, Luke Cunningham, a youth pastor at Turning Point Community Church in Lubbock, busted for 16 counts of sexual assault of a child. January of 25, Jerry Nickerson, a student pastor at Hope Fellowship Church in Frisco, busted for inappropriate contact with a minor. December of 24, Arturo Alarcon, an associate minister at 121 Community Church in Grapevine, possession of child sexual abuse material and invasive video recording from the hidden cameras he had set up. September of 24, Craig Stone, a youth director at Willowwood Church of the Nazarene in Denton, indecency with a child and possession of child sexual abuse material. And also in September of 24, Marvin Scales, a youth pastor at an unnamed Ellis County church, pleaded guilty to 2 counts of sexual abuse of a young child, 1 count of aggravated sexual assault of a child, and 1 count of sexual assault of a child. He was caught when it was discovered he impregnated a 14-year-old girl. And this Marvin Scales case is especially egregious. From the news reports, quote, Scales would regularly take the congregation's children on overnight trips, and he would have the children sleep over at his house, according to the DA. Victims told investigators Scales would have sex with them on the trips and the overnight stays. The DA's office said Scales had an extensive security system installed at his home that captured several of the sexual assaults. They said he even recorded several of the assaults himself and kept them at home. Scales is already a registered sex offender from a conviction in 1998 that the church could have learned of his past with a simple background check. The Ellis County District Clerk's criminal records show that he has 13 sex-related offenses listed, including possession of child sexual abuse material and aggravated sexual assault of a child. Then there are the men of the cloth who were sex pests with adult women in their flock. August of 25, Josiah Anthony, pastor at Cross Timbers Church in Argyle, was communicating inappropriately with women, using text messages and social media posts that were sexual in nature. October of 24, David Scarberry, the evangelistic outreach leader at Revival Church in McKinney, was arrested on a complaint of continuous violence against the family. Scarberry was previously convicted of possession of a controlled substance, using an offensive weapon in a felony, and distribution of a controlled substance and possession with intent to distribute. September of 24, Scott Crenshaw, senior pastor at Lake County Church in Saginaw, stepped down for looking at inappropriate material, something he was fired for at the New River Fellowship Church in 2016. August of 25, Kem Tao Glasgow, executive pastor of Gateway Church in Southlake, stepped away for a moral issue. September of 24, Stephen J. Lawson, the lead pastor at Trinity Bible Church in Dallas, for an inappropriate relationship that he has had with a woman. August of 24, Byron Copeland, the executive pastor at Cross Timbers Church in Argyle, for inappropriate communications with a female. July of 24, Ronald Goynes, the pastor of an unnamed church in Arlington, for indecent assault and another for sexual assault. July of 24, Taryn Dames, a senior pastor at North Dallas Community Bible Fellowship in Plano, for soliciting prostitution. And also in July of 24, Tony Camarota, associate pastor at Stonebriar Community Church in Frisco, for a moral failure. And these moral issues and moral failures, there wasn't a lot of detail, but it's suggested that it was inappropriate behavior with women. So, 7 Texas church pastors in just the past year who have been busted for sex crimes concerning children, and 9 more in the past 18 months who've got their issues with pestering, abusing, and disrespecting women. Have these guys been preaching from the Trump Bible? There's the country baseline, and you know that means it's time for our Boycott Idaho segment, where I explain all the reasons why you should avoid the handmaid state. There's 76 of them now, all cataloged at radicalruss.com/Idaho. And today we're doing greatest hits here, because I kind of started the Boycott Idaho segment and my list with noting how much Idaho hates marijuana. No other state in the United States actively hates marijuana as much as the state of Idaho. It is the only one of the western states that lacks any sort of medical recognition of cannabis. Even Wyoming recognizes CBD as a medical substance. Utah has a medical marijuana law, and all the rest of the western states have full-fledged marijuana legalization for all adults. But it goes beyond just maintaining marijuana prohibition in the state of Idaho as some sort of inertia. Idaho is actively fighting marijuana. We go all the way back to 2013 when the Idaho legislature, the House and the Senate, passed a non-binding resolution, a sense of the legislature, that declared that marijuana shall never be legal in the state of Idaho for any purpose at all. That was back in 2013. Then in 2014, when Utah began toppling all the dominoes of the southern states and the Midwestern states with the discovery of CBD oil for epileptic kids, there was about 17, 18 states that put forth laws to protect the medical use of CBD for these kids. Idaho had such a bill that actually made it all the way through the legislature just a couple of years after they had declared that marijuana would never be legal for any purpose. And when it got to the governor's desk, then Governor Butch Otter vetoed the bill. The only governor in the United States to have vetoed a bill for CBD oil for epileptic kids. He cited public safety, that it was a threat to public safety if we gave non-intoxicating CBD oil to epileptic kids. And it's continued with the legislature trying to put every roadblock in the way of citizens who would use the state's initiative system, the citizen initiative system, to put marijuana on the ballot. Since about 2012, activists have been trying to put together a medical marijuana initiative for Idaho. I was one of those activists in 2020, and I've helped with every campaign since 2016. The problem is Idaho's a tough nut to crack. Not a whole lot of marketplace for the passage of marijuana commerce to make any impact. There's not a whole lot of black people in the state of Idaho, so all the racial justice arguments don't work so well. And since the state is completely surrounded by states that have access to legal marijuana, the argument that patients can't get their medicine doesn't fly very well in Idaho either. Still, even though the major national funding groups have failed to come through for Idaho to try to put together some sort of professional campaign to legalize, the legislature is convinced that the big money marijuana forces out there are just itching to drop a few million into Idaho and to hijack the initiative system to pass legalized marijuana. So, since about 2016, the legislature has been trying to undo Idaho's initiative process. They've tried to increase the signature gathering requirements to require a greater percentage of signatures from more districts in a shorter time. Now, these bills have all failed, and some of them have even had to go before the Supreme Court of Idaho to determine that they violate one man, one vote in their efforts to try to subvert the initiative process. Well, next year, their biggest effort to date is made the ballot, and this is a constitutional amendment that the legislature has put forth to take away the power of citizens to pass any initiative that would change drug laws in the state of Idaho. Not any other thing but drug laws would be affected by this. They want to make it so that not only could citizens not pass an initiative to get medical marijuana legalized in the state of Idaho, but even if the legislature sometime in the future decided it wanted to change those laws, they've made it so they would require a 2/3 majority in the legislature to pass medical marijuana. That is how much the state hates marijuana. And just this year, they managed to pass a law, the only one in the nation, that sets up a $300 mandatory minimum fine for marijuana in the state for simple possession, medical or not. If you get caught with weed in Idaho, you are going to pay a $300 fine. And you may also be arrested and put in a jail cell. This week in the Radical Rant, I have a special message for some folks out there that thought I was overreacting last November when Donald Trump was announced the winner of the 2024 presidential election. Kind of lost my cool, started yelling about how these people had voted for a Nazi, how they had sold my country down the river for the promise of cheaper eggs. So this message is for those of you out there who voted for Donald Trump and told me I was overreacting. I was being hyperbolic. I was having a nervous breakdown based on Trump derangement syndrome. Because this week, the guy you voted for told the assembled leadership of the United States military that they will be waging war on Democratic U.S. cities, and he expects their loyalty when he orders them to fire on Americans in those cities. This followed the guy you voted for's Secretary of Warface publicly assembling the entire military leadership in one place at one time because he still has his job, even though he invited a reporter to an unencrypted chat to discuss active war plans. In just 8 months, the guy you voted for has dismantled U.S. aid, literally burning food and medicine that would have saved the lives of millions worldwide and destroying any love for America those people might have had. The guy you voted for has gutted all our public services. One couple with 3 kids in my neighborhood has lost $700 a month of food assistance. The single mom in the neighborhood with 3 kids, she lost $300. Healthcare costs are going up by about 75% soon. The guy you voted for appointed an anti-vax, brain-wormed, roadkill-eating, sewage-swimming madman to run our nation's health, so now there are over 1,500 confirmed cases of measles, the most recorded since we declared measles eradicated in 2000. He's also made it so getting any vaccinations is difficult. Oh, but enrolling your unvaxxed kid in public school is easy. The guy you voted for is now telling pregnant women not to take a Tylenol because it causes autism, which he thinks is terrible and must be eradicated. Not just another flavor of human neurodivergence to be appreciated, and encouraging them to take ibuprofen instead, a substance proven to lead to fetal deformities. The guy you voted for is using the power of his office to punish his enemies and dominate the media, academia, and law firms through bogus lawsuits and leveraging regulatory approvals. He's said that it should be illegal to criticize him. The guy you voted for is openly accepting bribes in the form of crypto from the most evil and brutal leaders on the planet. He's billions richer now, and your cost of groceries is still going up. He got Qatar to give him a luxury jetliner they couldn't sell that will pay over $1 billion to retrofit that then he gets to take home with him post-presidency. The guy you voted for has given Vladimir Putin the green light to do whatever he wants in Europe, which so far has been the relentless bombing of Ukrainian civilians, flying his drones and jets over Eastern Bloc NATO countries, and jamming the airplane landing electronics of the leaders of NATO nations. The guy you voted for has brought the dollar to lows it hasn't seen since the pandemic. He's enacted schizophrenic, exorbitant tariffs that have thrown businesses into chaos, not knowing how to plan for when taco kicks in, and use those tariffs to extract more bribes from companies. And those tariffs ought to be making your Christmas shopping much more expensive in, 3, 2, 1. The guy you voted for has forced companies to sell a 10% stake in their company to the U.S. government. And y'all think I'm the socialist? The guy you voted for is openly, publicly, mockingly blowing up fishing boats off the coast of Venezuela because he says they're narco-terrorists, murdering people in international waters. The guy you voted for has given badges, guns, and masks to the worst vicious racists and told them to round up 3,000 brown people a day. Literally tearing children from mothers, body slamming people half their size to the ground, disappearing them to various places around the country and even overseas. The guy you voted for can't account for 1,800 brown people his goons rounded up and put in the swamp concentration camp y'all laugh about and buy merch from. 1,800 people. Just gone. The guy you voted for not only got India turning now to ally with Russia and China, he managed to have his Gestapo raid a Hyundai plant in Georgia and treat the legal South Korean workers so poorly that we've lost South Korea as an ally. The guy you voted for is bit by bit destroying the country I love, the country I served, and harming the people I love directly. But y'all can't see it because he's holding a cross and wrapped in a flag while Toby Keith plays in the background. Besides, you don't live in one of those cities, and you're not one of those brown people, and gosh, aside from the darn high prices, everything's hunky-dory in your world. Open your eyes. This is Nazi shit. Just like I told you last November. Maybe you could claim ignorance then, but with 8 months of evidence now, you cannot deny that this is Nazi shit. Historians have a word for the people who voted for the Nazis, not for the Holocaust and the war, but for German pride and lower prices and not liking the other candidates. The word is Nazis. There is no neutrality when it comes to Nazis. You're either fighting them or you're helping them. And if you're now fighting them, I forgive your vote and welcome you to the pro-democracy side.
And it goes down smooth. Hey!
The Radical Russ Show is produced, directed, researched, written, recited, posted, and catered by me, Radical Russ Belville, and governed by Creative Commons Share-alike licensing. News clips and social media posts are reproduced under fair use copyright laws for commentary and analysis. My main theme is We Love the Herb by Herbal Nation, and the interstitial music is by me with my bass and my drum machine. Which brings us to our post-credits scene, and we gotta catch you up on the football, preps, college, and pro for me and my lady love. This week was a lot of bye weeks, though. My Nampa High Bulldogs still sitting at 1-5 because they had a bye week. Meanwhile, the Madison-Grant Argyles in Indiana notched another loss. They go to 5-2, losing 26-31 at Eastbrook. In the college level, the Boise State Broncos traveled for the first time to South Bend, Indiana to face number 21 Notre Dame on a nationally televised game in which they were spanked 7-28. They lost. Boise State follows to 3-2. Meanwhile, number 3 Oregon Ducks, they had a bye week as well. They're still sitting at 5-0. And at the pro level, my Packers, they had their bye week this week, so they're still sitting at 2-1-1. Meanwhile, the Indianapolis Colts got a win against the Raiders at home, 40-6. That leaves my prep, college, and pro team sitting at 6-8-1, still looking for a winning record. Meanwhile, my lady love Lori, her teams are sitting at 14-3. Also wanted to make note of something I saw come across my social media feed. It was a guy who posted a video of his kid who had just brought some homework home, and it was a handout stapled together with 3 or 4 pages, I suppose. And it was Charlie Kirk homework. It was all homework designed around Charlie Kirk, which reminds me of the smartest, wisest decision I ever made in my life, and that was to not have children, because I'm telling you, if I'd had some kids and they came home with Charlie Kirk homework, I'd have been catching some charges. Also, briefly, I wanted to mention something that I learned about the universe that I thought was interesting. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called the Andromeda paradox. So it goes like this. You know, the galaxy Andromeda, right? You can see it in the night sky. So the Andromeda galaxy is like 2.5 million light years away from us, meaning that the light you're seeing when you look up in the sky is 2.5 million years old. So the Andromeda paradox is that if I were sitting still and looking up at Andromeda, and you came running by, and at the very same moment that you got to where I was, you looked up and looked at Andromeda, the Andromeda you're looking at is 9 days earlier than my Andromeda. What? Yeah, so it all has to do with Einstein's relativity theory, right? And Einstein, and you may pick this up in the movie Interstellar. According to relativity, if you are near a massive object, something with great mass, or you are traveling at great speed, time moves slower for you than it does for someone who's standing still or not near the large object. So, as you get closer and closer to the speed of light, time is slowing down for you compared to someone who's still on Earth. So, using that idea, you running past me, you experience time slower than I do. Now, it's not a whole lot slower, like it's 0.00000000001% slower, because you're only running like 10 miles an hour or whatever, right? But it is slightly slower. Now, you take that 0.0000000, that big old 0.01 number, multiply it times 2.5 million years, you end up with about 9 days. So just the act of you running by me when you look up at Andromeda means the light you're seeing from Andromeda is 9 days earlier than the light I'm seeing from Andromeda. So, like, if Andromeda was to blow up, it can't, but suppose it did. If Andromeda was to blow up, you running by me, I'd like, look, Andromeda blow up. And you'd be like, no, it didn't. I know, it's mind-blowing. Look it up, the Andromeda Paradox. I love this kind of stuff. You can contact me by email at radicalruss@gmail.com. Call my message line at 877-RUSS-420. That's 877-877-420. And reach me on social media on Blue Sky as Radical Russ. And nowhere else. You can support this podcast financially by donating to Radical Russ on Venmo, Rad Russ on Cash App, or via PayPal on my website at radicalruss.com. Get this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, my website, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and until next week, take care of each other.
You grow it, you try it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you try it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down.